Hi, this is Daniel Johnstein. Let's take a look at the Revit 2014 user interface. We'll start at the top and work our way down. At the very top we have the application menu. In the center we have the program name and the project file that we are currently in. To the far left we have this large purple R, which represents the application menu. When we click on it, we see a menu appear that shows several file management tools, such as Open, Save, New, Export. We also have a couple of printing options. And then these two little icons at the top allow us to see open files, so we can have more than one Revit model open right now. And this lets us see which are open. And then to the left of that we have recent documents. So rather than clicking open and browsing for a file, we can click here and then quickly click one of the recent files in the list, and that file will open no matter where it is on your hard drive or your network. In the lower right we see an options button. When we click on that, it opens the options dialog box. As a new user, you typically shouldn't change much in here until you're more familiar with the program. One thing I'd like to point out, however, is on the Graphics tab, if you're having problems with Revit crashing, you may want to turn off Use Hardware Acceleration. It may make Revit run a little bit slower as far as panning and zooming, but that's better than crashing. So you want to potentially turn this off if needed. And up above that here you can see there's some information about the graphics card that you have. It's important to make sure that you have an updated graphics driver on your computer. So we'll click Cancel to close this. To the right of the application menu we have the Quick Access toolbar. As the name implies, these are several tools that are quickly accessible regardless of what the rest of the user interface environment looks like. Several tools have been added there by Autodesk that are commonly used, such as Save, the Distance tool, Measure, Text, Section. Other tools can be added up here as well. To the far right of the application title bar we have an area where we can type in a search word to search the help system. To the right of that a ways we have a sign-in area so that we can log into the Autodesk 360 Cloud Services area. Here you can save your files to the cloud and also access things such as cloud rendering. It is recommended while you're working through the Revit textbook that you actually save your files to the cloud so that you have access to them from other computers, and also this provides a safe backup away from your computer. The question mark allows access to the help interface. The down arrow next to that gives you a few other related options. One of them is this About option at the bottom. That opens the About Autodesk Revit 2014 dialog box. And one thing I'd like to point out here is the build number. Below that you'll typically see any service packs that might have been applied. So each year Autodesk comes out with 1, 2, or 3 service packs depending on how many problems come up with the software once it's been made available to the general public. And if problems are found, they make corrections and provide those for free at their website, autodesk.com. So you'll want to take a look at Autodesk's website and compare the build number here with the service pack build that's available. Make sure you're up to date. So we'll click this red X to close out. In the upper right corner of the entire program we have 3 buttons. The red X is to close the program completely. If we have any unsaved work, Revit will prompt us to save before completely closing the program. The next button over allows us to either maximize or tile the application window on the screen. So if it's maximized, this one Revit program is taking up the entire screen. If it's already maximized, clicking this button is going to make the window a smaller portion of the overall screen that you're looking at so that you can view another program such as Microsoft Excel at the same time. The far left button here minimizes the program down to the Windows taskbar. The program will still be running but just not visible. Below the application title bar we have the ribbon. The ribbon is comprised of several tabs and then smaller groups of tools called panels. So this is the build panel, the circulation panel, the model panel, and so on and so forth. So within these panels we have different tools or buttons. So we have a window tool and a door button, and these are single buttons that you click on and it'll start the command. When we look at the wall tool, we notice there's two distinct areas. This is called a split button. So if we click the top part of this button, it'll start the wall tool immediately. If we click the bottom part, we'll see several tools in a stack. So it should be pointed out that this first tool is the same tool that would be started if we clicked the top part of the button. The subsequent options are related to walls but are slightly different commands. So this just saves a little space on the user interface for some tools that maybe aren't used quite as often. Another thing we'll notice is some of these panel titles have a little down arrow next to them. So this little black down arrow means there's some additional tools in the panel flyout area. So clicking on anywhere on the panel title, we see a panel flyout, and in this case there's two additional tools. We could pin this open if we know we're going to be using these tools a lot. Otherwise, once we click on the tool or move our cursor away from it, it automatically collapses. Some buttons are just simple drop-down lists. So if we look at this additional settings button on the Manage tab, we'll see that by clicking it, we automatically get a list of other options. I'll hit Escape to make that go away. One other feature in the ribbon are these little arrows in the lower right corner of a panel. If we click that, it opens a dialog box with some related settings to that panel. So we just clicked the arrow for the structure panel area, and it opens the structural settings dialog box, where we can control several settings related to how the structural model is represented in this file. So we'll hit cancel there. Something else that you need to be aware of is this little toggle at the end of the tabs. This controls 4 different states of the ribbon. This is useful for people who have smaller monitors and need a larger drawing area down below. So we go ahead and click on this 4 times and we'll see 4 different states. So this is the smallest, most collapsed situation for the ribbon. And if we click on one of these tabs, the entire ribbon shows up and we can click a command. As soon as we click a command or move our cursor away, the ribbon collapses back down to just seeing the tab names. If you need to get back to the original state, you just keep clicking this until you see the entire panel and ribbon situation show up. It is recommended that you leave the ribbon maximized while you're learning Revit, and especially to make sure that the images on your screen match the images in the book, and especially to make sure what you see on the screen matches the images in the book. One last thing about the ribbon before we move on is it is possible to drag one of these panels out into the drawing area, and that panel will always be visible even with other tabs selected. So if you're going to be using these build tools, for example, you might pull this panel out for a while. The Revit ribbon is not customizable in the sense that you can't take this panel and move it to another tab or another location. When we're done with this panel, we can hover our cursor over it and these sidebars show up. In the upper right, there's a Return Panels to Ribbon option, and it'll always put it back in the same place it came from. Below the ribbon, we have what's called the options bar. Right now it's completely blank, but this is a contextual area that shows information related to the current tool or element selected in the model. So for example, if we click the wall tool, and it should be noted we're not learning how to use the wall tool right now, but if we click the wall tool, notice that there's several options related to drawing a wall, how high it should be and its location line and offset. Also on the ribbon, notice that the Modify tab has become current, and it also has some appended information related to the current tool, in this case Place Wall. And so to the right of this green vertical bar, there's some tools related to placing a wall. And in this case, it has to do with the shape of the wall. Are we going to draw one straight line or 4 lines at once, which represent a rectangle? So we'll go ahead and hit Escape to cancel that. On the left side of the screen, we have 2 important features: the Properties palette, and below that, the Project Browser. The Properties palette shows information either on the view or an element selected in the model. Right now, nothing in the model is selected, so the Properties palette is showing the view properties for the current view. We can tell that the current view is level 1 floor plan by looking at the application title bar, and also in the project browser, which we'll get to in a minute, level 1 happens to be bold. Also in the Properties palette, it tells us that level 1 is the current view. So with the Properties palette and nothing selected, we see that the current scale is 1/8 inch, the detail level is coarse, the orientation is project north. This is also referred to as plan north as opposed to true north. And then there's a few other settings here related to the view that we're in. When something is selected, so if we were to quickly draw a wall in this model and select the wall, with something selected in the model, the Properties palette shows the properties for the selected element. So we'll go ahead and hit Escape, and it reverts back to the view properties. At the top of the Properties palette is this very pivotal concept in Revit called the Type Selector. So when we're in a wall command, from this Type Selector, we can pick which type of wall we wish to draw. If we select something that's already been drawn in the model, the Type Selector lets us swap out that type with a different type that's been defined in this file. So we just quickly switched from a generic wall to a more complex cavity wall. Another thing to note that I should have mentioned previously on the ribbon is that the Modify button here allows you to quickly cancel any current command or unselect anything that might be selected. That's distinctly different than the Modify tab on the ribbon. The Modify tab gives you access to several tools to actually modify the model. Notice that no matter which tab is active on the ribbon, there's always a Modify button at the beginning here. So clicking the Modify button will quickly cancel any command or unselect anything that's currently selected. Also, hitting the Escape key 1, 2, or 3 times, depending on the situation, will also do the same thing. Below the Properties palette, as mentioned, was the Project Browser. This is a kind of the grand central station of the Revit database. In a traditional CAD system, this might be analogous to folders and files, where each file represents a floor plan, an elevation, a schedule. Seeing as Revit's all one database, everything's in one file, we use this area to access that database. If I collapse the Views area, we can see the 7 main categories that exist. So we have views, which are, generally speaking, horizontal and vertical slices through the building, floor plans and sections and elevations. We also, in this category, have 2D drafting views available that aren't really part of the model. Then the next major category is legends, and then schedules. So a schedule is live tabular data of the project. So a door schedule will only have 3 rows in the door schedule if there are 3 doors in the project. Then we have sheets. So views and schedules go on sheets, and then those sheets are printed with borders at a specific scale. We have families, which is the content. So if we expand this area, we'll see which doors and windows are available to be placed in this project. Content has to be loaded into your file to be accessible. We also have groups and Revit links. So a Revit link would be an entire separate Revit model linked into your Revit model. So the structural model could potentially be a separate file being linked into your model If we expand the views category again, as mentioned a moment ago, the bold view is the current view. If we wanted to switch to the level 2 view, we'd double click on it. Or the south elevation, we double click on it, and we can see the view changes over here in the drawing area. If we want to close a view, we can click the X in the upper right corner of the drawing area. That's going to close any open views. And so now we're back down to one view. In the lower left corner of the screen, below the drawing area, we have the view control bar. These are settings for the current view. To make that clear, let's go ahead and open level 2, and then we'll click this middle button here to show both views at once. So we have level 1 and level 2, and each view has its own view control bar, which makes sense seeing as level 2 might need to be 1/4 inch equals a foot, and level 1 1/8 inch equals a foot. So we'll go ahead and maximize that again so that we're only seeing one view. Typically you'd have the view maximized like this so that you have the largest drawing area possible. A quick tip to switch views is to press Control Tab on the keyboard. Notice in the project browser that level 1 and level 2 are alternating between being bold and not being bold, and that's because I'm pressing Control Tab on the keyboard. Another quick way to close extra views other than the one you currently have open is on the Quick Access toolbar, clicking this Close Hidden Windows toggle. In the upper right corner of the drawing area, we have the navigation bar. So there's some zoom tools and also the nav wheel, which allows you to navigate a 3D model. The zoom tool is a split button, so if we click the down arrow, we have several zoom options. Most of the time you can use the wheel on your mouse, so spinning the wheel allows you to zoom in and out, and holding the wheel down and dragging the mouse allows you to pan, and double clicking on the wheel allows you to zoom extents so that you can see everything that's in the model in the current window. At the very bottom of the screen we have the status bar. This is the entire area across the bottom of the screen. In the lower left we have some information from Revit about what our cursor is hovering over, or if we're in a command, like we go back to the wall command for example, we see the prompt there to click to enter wall start point. And then we see a prompt again after we've clicked our first point, enter wall end point. Spacebar flips orientation. So hitting the spacebar would flip the brick from one side of the wall to the other side of the wall. I'll go ahead and hit escape a couple times there to cancel that command. So when you're learning Revit, it's a good idea to watch the lower left corner there so that you can know what Revit's expecting you to do next. Towards the center here on the status bar we have a series of tools. The first couple of options here relate to working with multiple people in the same database. This is called the work sharing tools. There's a video on this that you can watch later to understand how that works a little better. To the right of that are the design option tools. Those are covered in the Revit textbooks. And then to the far right here we have some toggles that are actually new to Revit 2014. The first one allows you to not select anything that's in a link. So as I mentioned earlier, you could have a structural model linked in, and in the past you'd have to be careful that you didn't accidentally select that model and move it. This toggle allows linked elements to not be selected. The next option over is for underlay elements to not be selected. So if you're on the third floor plan in a project, in the view properties you can set the underlay to level 2 so that you could see the walls below the third floor plan and make sure things are lining up, for example. But when that is visible, the level 2 elements, it is possible to select those and either move them or delete them. So by toggling this option you cannot select the underlay elements that you can see on the screen. Same thing with pinned elements. And then another feature here that's new is the ability to select an element by face. So previously you could only select a floor or a wall by clicking on its perimeter. So in floor plan, in a plan view, you'd have to select the outside edge, the actual line that you could see of the floor, an actual floor object, to be able to select it. Now if you toggle on this select elements by face, you can select anywhere within the perimeter of the floor as well to select it, because Revit's recognizing the face of that element. Sometimes with this on, it makes other things difficult to select, so this may need to be toggled on and off as needed. To the right of the select elements by face, we have the drag elements on selection. If this is turned on, putting our cursor over an element and then clicking and dragging will initiate the move command. A lot of times we want that turned on in a large complex model, because when we're trying to select a window, our cursor actually thinks we're trying to pick something and starts the move command rather than a larger selection window. And then to the right of that, we have the filter and the number of elements selected. You'll learn more about those later. So that's a quick look at the Revit user interface. You're going to want to make sure that you take a little time and understand the terms. Understanding the terms will help you to work through the textbook more efficiently. So just a quick recap. In the upper left, we have the application menu. To the right of that, we have the quick access toolbar. We have the ribbon with tabs and panels. We have the options bar. We have the properties palette. We have the project browser. We have the main drawing window. We have the navigation bar. Below the drawing window, for each view, we have a view control bar. And across the bottom, we have the status bar. So that's it. Thanks.